because they knew that the Prime Minister was there for the Far East Summit. But there were the Chinese and the North Koreans doing business. They had their bazaars there, Saturday bazaar, Sunday bazaar, maybe thousands of them. So, the integration of the Chinese economy with the Russian Far East is far more intense, silent, under the carpet, and we have no imagination of that larger part of Russia.
Yeah. No, but actually you're right about that. The Chinese are doing their best to infiltrate themselves into the Siberian areas of Russia and across the Ussuri River particularly. And because the population on the Russian side is so sparse, is so little, so they've been able to come over and take over. And the Chinese, Russians are very worried about this. This is a matter of worry for them. And you know that in the past, there have been, in fact, direct conflict between China and Russia over the Ussuri River border between the two countries. And so this is always a big question mark in the Russian mind. They're worried about the Chinese infiltrating themselves and establishing themselves and taking over even areas of land on the Russian side. So I think the movement, the idea of labor mobility from India to Russia is a very good one. It will be maybe in the European part of Russia in the beginning, but I think it will also be on the far east seaboard of Russia in the Vladivostok region and so on, because those areas are also very well developed. And I think our Indian workers, Indian labor force, Indian engineers are very dynamic and willing to go everywhere. So I think if the conditions are right, if the terms of exchange are right, and the system is simplified so that our labor can move there easily, I think it is a great prospect. As I told you before, in the 70s and 80s, there were so many. Everywhere you went in Russia, no matter where you traveled, you met Indians there everywhere. And the first Indian restaurant in Moscow actually opened up while we were there. It was a great success, And so all these things, Indian cuisine is very popular. Indian films are very popular. This cultural interaction between India and Russia has really gone down after 1991, after breakup of the Soviet Union, because particularly under President Boris Yeltsin time, the look west for Russia was so strong. They really thought that their solution lay in having these good relations with the West. Today, under President Putin, he's very realistic. He knows that that is no longer going to be, an option for Moscow. He realizes that perhaps in that option, he would never have got an equal deal with the West. So now he's looking very strongly to develop his relationships with Asia, with the South, countries of the South, and with India being given prime importance. So I think that this visit is particularly significant in this context to set this new for the relationship.
So, Karthik, if I may add to what Ambassador Sikri is saying, I think there is a great realization on India's part also that with China in the mix as far as Russia is concerned, there's a natural limit to how far our engagement with Russia is also going to go. So I don't see this engagement with Russia, the celebration of President Putin's visit, or the talk of a deeper engagement with Russia on multiple fronts as something which is designed to counter or in some sense to upset US. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's backed by a realization that we need to engage with Russia, which has been our long-standing ally for almost 8 decades, which has helped us give essential critical defense equipment when the West refused to give us, and also transfer technology. So I think on Russia's part, there's also realization that China is not something that it can, it needs to cultivate and get closer to, because it's a natural counterbalance to the US. So I think there is a very calibrated kind of a dance, if you could say, a geopolitical diplomatic dance that's happening among the countries around the world. And that is what we're seeing playing out right now in Delhi. It's all very carefully curated and carefully orchestrated engagement that's happening, which is also reflective of the multipolar world that we now realize we're going to live in. It's not going to be a unipolar where there's one superpower that's going to dominate like US, which is actually giving up some of that role willingly to that extent, Karthikeya. So it's a very careful calibration of diplomatic games that are playing out right in front of our eyes as we watch this whole scene in Delhi.
You wanted to say something, Ambassador, because I had a very specific question to you in context of your former colleague Pankaj Saran. Please go ahead.
Okay, I want to say that yes, there is some kind of calibration, and of course, every meeting takes account of the current geopolitical situation. But I think we have to also take into account that For India, this is not tactical at all. Please understand that the India-Russia relationship is strategic.
Absolutely.
Part of India's strategic autonomy, and we've always followed it. This is nothing new that's come up in the last few years. I mean, as Prime Minister Modi himself mentioned, 25 years. It's the 26th year now for this annual bilateral summit. It's with very few other countries that we have this. It's been going on through thick and thin. So I think India's strategic autonomy will remain. Russia will always be an important part of it. At the moment, because the geopolitical situation is so fragile, some additional considerations may come into play. But at all times, the basic bedrock of the India-Russia relationship, on which this visit is going to create a new edifice, new directions for the 21st century. These will be very long lasting. They're not going to be dependent just on what happens with India and USA or India and Europe and so on. So I think this is important. It is strategic. It's not tactical.
Okay. So, you know what Pankaj Saran wrote, who has also served in Russia? He said, if I recall it right, the India-Russian or the Soviet Union-Russia relationship survived, the relationship at independence, post-independence, Cold War, multipolarity, post-multipolarity. And he says that it's like an investment portfolio, a part of it which is nothing flashy, but mandatory. So does that define India-Russia relationship, that, it's not flashy, but you must have it?
Yes, absolutely. We must have the India-Russia relationship because this is in our best interest, and Russia has shown again and again that they also find a great benefit. I mean, look what happened in 1971. I don't know how many of us know, because this doesn't even come up very often in the history books, that in 1971, when the USS Enterprise was sailing towards the Bay of Bengal and hoping very much to enter the Bay of Bengal and really stop all the hostilities that were going on there. At that time, by invoking the Indo-Soviet Treaty and telling the Soviet Union what was happening, the Soviet Union sent their submarine fleet. And just at the point where the USS Enterprise was about to enter the Bay of Bengal, the Soviet submarines came up and stopped the USS Enterprise in its path. And the USS Enterprise captain reported to his authorities in America, I cannot go any further, I'm turning back. Because the Americans did not want a war with the Soviet Union. I think this is not even, so I would recognize this, but it's not even there in our history books. So I think we have to understand the basis of the relationship, the basis of the understanding. We know, India and Russia, that we're always there for each other. And that is why we keep each other informed. Whatever's happening in the peace talks, whatever's happening in the trade talks, I think this opening up of the Russian market is going to be very significant. I hope we see great steps forward on that. And I think that we are going to see something that will have a really long-term impact on India. And in a way, it's timely, because really speaking, putting our eggs in any one basket is not going to help India in our strategic autonomy.